What if one part of your plugin should load only when a specific IDE module is available? Today, we will move CSS PSI functionality behind an optional content module. The sample plugin will have two content modules, a required core name shared and an optional name CSS. This plugin stays usable even when CSS support is missing. We will use plugin model v2, a new way to structure and package JetBrains IDE plugins. Follow the link in the description to learn more about this new plugin model. The CSS content module depends on two things: our own shared content module and the bundled module with CSS support. If CSS support is available, the plugin can use the stylesheet PSI, and if not, the optional module stays out of the way, but the required part of the plugin still works. We start with a file, new project and IDE Plugin Generator. Then do the generic cleanup. Comments, boilerplate, dependencies and template values are all gone. We changed the target platform to 2025.3 because this version provides an experimental base for plugin model v2. Now the main build prepares every subproject to become a plugin content module. Each subproject gets two plugins: content module support and Kotlin. Later, when we add shared and CSS, they are not just Gradle modules, they are IntelliJ Plugin content modules. The first content module is shared. This is the required core. It will hold behavior that is always available to users and to other content modules. At this point, it's an empty subproject, because we have not yet told the plugin descriptor that it is a part of the plugin. This is the Gradle side. Adding the implementation dependency makes the shared module part of the multi-project build. Later, the plugin descriptor will tell the platform how this module loads the runtime. Now shared gets its own content module descriptor in the root of the module resources. It is bare bones, but necessary. Be careful with the naming. The directory is shared, but the descriptor is myproject.shared.xml, and the content module identifier is just myproject.shared. The main plugin descriptor now declares myproject.shared with loading attributes set to required. This indicates a mandatory module. If it cannot load, the plugin is completely disabled. So now we have the first half of the module, required core. The required content module now gets a service. Shared message service returns a constant message. This service is intentionally simple, because its real job in this demo is purely architectural. It gives the optional CSS module something from shared to depend on. Now the required content module contributes a little bit of UI. Shared action calls shared message service and shows the result in a dialog. This action is registered inside myproject.shared.xml and not inside the main plugin XML, because this is the split. The main descriptor says that the module exists, the module descriptor says what the module does. Let's run the plugin and show that the shared action is actually executable. Now we create the second content module, CSS. This one has a different role. It is a functionality that should appear only when CSS support is available in the IDE. The main plugin module now depends on CSS for packaging. Again, this is the Gradle side. CSS is the second module in the multi-module build. Whether it actually loads is decided by the plugin descriptor. The CSS module gets its own descriptor as well, myproject.css.xml. For now, it is just an empty root element. And again, watch the naming. myproject.css is the module name, myproject.css.xml is the name of the descriptor, and CSS is the directory name. Now root descriptor declares myproject.css with loading attribute set to optional. This is the second half of the module, optional capability. The plugin can load even without this module. And the optional module depends on the required one. This is the first dependency that we want to demonstrate. CSS depends on shared. The dependency appears in two places. In Gradle, combine implementation with project, and that lets CSS compiled against code from the share module. In the module descriptor, module with the name set to myproject.shared tells the platform that shared must be loaded before CSS. Gradle decides what compiles, and the descriptor decides what loads. The optional module now proves the dependency on shared. CSS action calls shared message service and shows the dialog. But this is not CSS PSI yet. Before adding platform CSS APIs, we first demonstrate that one plugin content module can depend on another. CSS stylesheet PSI lives in the IDE module with the name IntelliJ.css. Let's depend on it. First, Gradle build script declares bundle module, and second, the module descriptor declares module element with the name set to IntelliJ.css. This is required for the CSS content module. However, CSS content module is optional for the plugin. Now, the optional module functionality. The action creates an in-memory CSS file from a static style sheet. Then, the code reads the PSI under read action on the background thread, walks the rule sets, collects selector names, and shows them in a dialog. If IntelliJ.css module is present, the CSS action can use the CSS PSI. But if it is missing, this module does not load, but the required share module will still work. And finally, the build gets a dedicated run task for IntelliJ IDE 2026.1. In this version, CSS functionality is available even without the subscription. Run the plugin, open Search Everywhere, and invoke the share action. This share action demonstrates the required core. Then, invoke the CSS action. This demonstrates optional functionality backed by IntelliJ.css module and CSS PSI. The plugin declares two content modules. MyProject.shared is the required one. It provides always available share behavior. On the other hand, MyProject.share is optional. It depends on MyProject.shared and on the bundle IntelliJ.css module. Inside this optional module, CSS PSI is used to read the style sheet and display selector names. And that is the pattern. Isolate platform-specific optional functionality in a content module whose dependencies describe exactly when it can load. Follow me for more JetBrains IDE SDK tips and content.